The door wasn't supposed to be open. That's what Mark Reynolds would remember later, how strange it was to see the frosted glass door to the executive suite slightly ajar, a sliver of vulnerability in an otherwise impenetrable fortress. He hesitated, hand raised to knock, when he heard it, the unmistakable sound of someone crying. Not just anyone, her. The woman who terrified half the company and inspired fierce loyalty in the other half. The woman who had never, in the 3 years he'd worked under her, shown anything but steely determination. The woman who held his future, and by extension his daughter's future, in her perfectly manicured hands. If you're feeling that pull to know what happens next, what could possibly break the composure of the formidable Alexandra Chen, CEO of Horizon Innovations, you're in the right place. This story might just change how you see the people in your life, especially those who seem to have it all together. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to catch more stories that reveal the humanity behind the masks we all wear. Mark shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the folder in his hands suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He should leave. Whatever was happening behind that door was none of his business. The quarterly reports could wait until morning. But something kept him rooted to the spot. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was concern. Or maybe it was the memory of how Ms. Chen had reacted 3 months ago when he'd had to leave work suddenly because his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, had fallen off the monkey bars at school and broken her arm. Family comes first, Reynolds, she had said, already reaching for her car keys. I'll drive you to the hospital myself. Before he could decide what to do, the sound of something shattering came from inside the office. Instinct took over. Mark pushed the door open. Alexandra Chen stood with her back to him, facing the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the glittering city skyline. Her normally perfect posture was crumpled, one hand braced against the glass, the other covering her mouth as if to physically hold back the sobs that shook her slender frame. At her feet lay the shattered remains of what had once been a Crystal Award, CEO of the Year, if Mark remembered correctly. Ms. Chen, he said softly. She whirled around, eyes wide with shock and something else. Was it fear? Her makeup, always flawless, had created dark rivers down her cheeks. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the power dynamic between them suddenly scrambled beyond recognition. Reynolds. Her voice cracked. She straightened, attempting to reassemble her CEO persona like putting on armor. I didn't hear you knock. I'm sorry, Mark stammered. The door was open, and I heard. I thought maybe you needed help. A bitter laugh escaped her. Help? Yes, I suppose I do need help. But not the kind anyone can give me. She gestured vaguely at the broken award. Sorry about the dramatics. Bad news tends to bring out the worst in me. Mark took a tentative step forward. Is there anything I can do? Something in his voice, the genuine concern perhaps, seemed to crack what remained of her composure. Fresh tears welled in her eyes. You have a daughter, don't you, Reynolds? The question caught him off guard. Yes. Lily. She's 8. Alexandra nodded, as if confirming something to herself. Then she whispered words that would change everything between them. I have 6 months to live. The silence that followed felt eternal. Mark's mind raced to process what he'd just heard, to find the right words, any words, to respond. But what do you say to someone who has just shared that their life has an expiration date? I'm so sorry, he finally managed, knowing how woefully inadequate it sounded. Alexandra turned back to the window, her reflection ghostly against the night sky. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. By the time they found it. She shook her head. Well, you know how that story ends. Mark set his folder down on her desk and cautiously approached. Does anyone else know? Just my doctor. And now you. She glanced at him, a wry smile twisting her lips. Congratulations on being the second person in the world to know that the great Alexandra Chen is mortal after all. Why tell me? Mark asked, genuinely puzzled. She was quiet for a long moment. Because you came in. Because you looked concerned rather than eager to witness my downfall. Because. Her voice softened. Because I've watched how you are with your daughter. How you've rebuilt your life after losing your wife. How you never miss a school play or a parent-teacher conference, no matter what deadlines are looming. Mark felt a lump forming in his throat. His wife, Sarah, had died in a car accident when Lily was just 4. The past 4 years had been a crash course in single parenthood, grief management, and finding new purpose. He'd never imagined that his boss had been paying such close attention. I don't have children, Alexandra continued. Never found the time. Always thought there would be more time. Her laugh was hollow. The irony isn't lost on me. Mark found himself doing something that would have been unthinkable just 10 minutes earlier. He placed a gentle hand on his CEO's shoulder. What can I do? She turned to face him fully, vulnerability and determination warring in her expression. Help me make these 6 months count. Help me leave something behind that matters. The next morning, Mark arrived at work earlier than usual, unsure of what to expect. Would Alexandra pretend their conversation had never happened? Would she avoid him? Or worse, would she regret her moment of vulnerability and push him away? He needn't have worried. At precisely 7:30 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text message, "My office. 8 a.m. Bring coffee. The good kind." When he entered her office, knocking this time, Alexandra was seated behind her desk, looking every inch the powerful CEO in a crisp navy suit, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. If not for the slight puffiness around her eyes, no one would guess she'd been in emotional turmoil just hours before. "Reynolds," she greeted him, accepting the coffee he offered. "I assume I don't need to tell you that what I shared last night stays between us." "Of course," Mark nodded. "Good." She took a sip of coffee and gestured for him to sit. "I've been thinking about what I said, about making these months count. I have a proposition for you." Mark leaned forward, curious. "I need a project. Something meaningful. Something that isn't just about profit margins and shareholder value." Her eyes took on an intensity that was both familiar and new. "I want to create a foundation. Something to support single parents in the workforce." Mark blinked in surprise. That's incredible." "It's necessary," she corrected. "Do you know how many brilliant minds we lose because companies aren't willing to accommodate the realities of parenthood? How many single parents, especially single mothers, are forced to choose between career advancement and being present for their children?" Mark knew all too well. He'd been fortunate that Horizon Innovations had flexible policies, but he'd heard plenty of horror stories from other single parents in his support group. "I want you to help me build this," Alexandra continued. "You understand the challenges firsthand. You have the financial background to help structure it properly. And..." She hesitated. "I trust you." Those 3 words, coming from Alexandra Chen, felt monumental. In the cutthroat world of corporate finance, trust was rarer than platinum. "I'm in," Mark said without hesitation. "But won't the board have questions? About why you're suddenly focusing on this?" Alexandra's smile was enigmatic. "Let me worry about the board. You focus on helping me create something that will outlast both of us." Over the next few weeks, Mark found himself living a double life. By day, he performed his regular duties as financial analyst for Horizon Innovations. But during lunch breaks, after hours, and sometimes in the early mornings before Lily woke up, he worked with Alexandra on what they had come to call the Horizon Project. The foundation would provide grants to companies willing to implement truly family-friendly policies. It would offer scholarships for single parents pursuing higher education or professional certifications. And it would create a network of mentors, successful professionals who had navigated the challenges of single parenthood and could guide others. As they worked together, the walls between CEO and employee gradually dissolved. Mark began to see Alexandra not as the intimidating executive who could make or break careers with a single word, but as a brilliant, complex woman racing against an invisible clock. And Alexandra, for her part, seemed to find in Mark something she hadn't realized she was missing, someone who saw her as a person first, a CEO second. "Why did you never remarry?" she asked him one evening as they were reviewing potential board members for the foundation. They had moved their work session to her penthouse apartment, a sleek, minimalist space with stunning views but few personal touches. Mark looked up from his laptop, surprised by the personal question. "I guess I never found the right time. Or the right person." He smiled ruefully. "Dating as a single dad isn't exactly simple." "I imagine not," Alexandra murmured. "But Lily, she must want a mother figure in her life? She has my sister, who's amazing with her. And Sarah's parents are very involved." Mark hesitated, then added, "I think what Lily needs most is stability and love. The conventional family structure is less important than knowing she's secure." Alexandra nodded thoughtfully. "You're a good father, Reynolds." "Mark," he corrected gently. "After all this time working together, I think you can call me Mark." She smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "Mark," she repeated, as if testing how the name felt on her tongue. "And I suppose you should call me Alex." Alexandra always felt too formal, even for a CEO. "Alex," he agreed, feeling as if some invisible boundary had just been crossed. The moment was interrupted by his phone ringing, Lily's babysitter. He answered quickly, his expression shifting to concern as he listened. "I'll be right there," he promised, already standing and gathering his things. "Lily has a fever," he explained to Alex. "I need to go." "Of course," she said immediately. "We can continue tomorrow." Mark hesitated at the door. Would you like to come with me? Meet Lily?" The invitation surprised even him. Alex looked momentarily startled, then uncertain. "I don't want to intrude on a family moment." "You wouldn't be," Mark assured her. "And honestly, Lily's been curious about you ever since I mentioned we were working on a special project together. She thinks it's very cool that I know a lady boss." A smile tugged at Alex's lips. "A lady boss, huh? Well, when you put it that way, how can I refuse?" Lily Reynolds was a miniature version of her father, same thoughtful brown eyes, same determined chin, same tendency to furrow her brow when concentrating. Even with a fever of 101, she managed to sit up with interest when Mark brought Alex into their modest apartment. "You're the lady boss," Lily stated, eyeing Alex with undisguised curiosity. Alex, who had faced down boardrooms full of hostile executives without breaking a sweat, suddenly felt nervous under the gaze of this small, pajama-clad judge. "I suppose I am," she acknowledged. "Though your dad is teaching me that being a boss isn't the most important job in the world." Lily considered this. "What is, then?" Alex glanced at Mark, who was measuring out children's fever reducer with the practiced ease of a parent who had done this many times before. "I think being a good person might be the most important job." "Your dad is very good at that one." Lily nodded sagely. "He is. He makes the best chicken soup when I'm sick, and he never forgets to check for monsters under the bed, even though I'm 8 now and I know monsters aren't real." She paused, then added generously, "You can stay for soup if you want." And so Alex found herself sitting at a small kitchen table in a cozy apartment that couldn't have been more different from her sleek penthouse, watching as Mark prepared homemade chicken soup from scratch while simultaneously helping Lily with a jigsaw puzzle spread out on the coffee table. "He does this every time I'm sick," Lily informed Alex, as if sharing an important state secret. "Mom taught him how to make the soup before she went to heaven." Alex felt her throat tighten. "That's a wonderful tradition." Lily nodded. Dad says traditions are important because they're like invisible strings that connect us to people we love, even when they're not here anymore. She looked at Alex curiously. Do you have traditions with your family? The innocent question hit Alex like a physical blow. Family traditions. Another thing she had always put off, assuming there would be time later. Time to find a partner. Time to start a family. Time to create those invisible strings of connection. Not many, she admitted softly. I've been very busy with work. Lily considered this with the straightforward logic of childhood. That's sad. Everyone should have traditions. She brightened. You could share ours. Dad always makes extra soup anyway. From the kitchen, Mark called out, Lily, don't pressure Ms. Chen. Both Alex and Lily corrected simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise before dissolving into giggles. Something warm and unfamiliar bloomed in Alex's chest as she sat there, laughing with this child who offered friendship so easily, in this home that felt lived in and loved in a way her expensive apartment never had. Later, as they ate soup together, which was, indeed, excellent, Alex found herself thinking that if she had to receive a death sentence to discover what living actually meant, perhaps the universe had a darker sense of humor than she'd given it credit for. The weeks turned into months. The Horizon project took shape, gaining support from unexpected quarters. Several board members, initially skeptical, became champions of the cause after Alex presented compelling data on how family-friendly policies improved retention, productivity, and company culture. What no one but Mark knew was that each presentation, each late night of work, each victory came at an increasing physical cost to Alex. The treatments she was undergoing, not to cure, but to buy time, left her exhausted and sometimes in pain. Yet she pushed forward with a determination that awed him. Their professional relationship had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated, a friendship built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and increasingly, a deep affection that neither was quite ready to name. Lily, for her part, had become Alex's most enthusiastic supporter. After that first night of chicken soup, Alex had become a regular visitor to the Reynolds household. She helped Lily with her math homework. She attended Lily's school play, sitting beside Mark and cheering so loudly when Lily delivered her 2 lines as tree number 3 that Mark had teased her about it for days afterward. In return, Lily and Mark had begun to fill the gaps in Alex's life that she hadn't even recognized were there. They introduced her to the concept of Pajama Pizza Fridays, a sacred tradition involving delivery pizza, pajamas worn at the dinner table, and board games that often devolved into fits of laughter. They took her to the local farmers market on Sunday mornings, where Lily insisted on teaching her the proper way to select a ripe avocado. Small moments. Ordinary pleasures. The very things Alex had always been too busy pursuing success to notice. For months after that fateful night in her office, Alex invited Mark to join her for a doctor's appointment. They sat together in the sterile examination room, waiting for the oncologist to return with the latest scan results. Whatever he says, Alex said quietly, I want you to know that these have been the best months of my life. Mark took her hand, his throat too tight to speak. When had this woman become so essential to his world? How had he not seen it coming? The doctor entered, his expression carefully neutral, the practiced look of someone who had delivered both miracles and devastation throughout his career. The treatment is working better than we anticipated, he said without preamble. The tumors have shrunk significantly. I can't promise remission, but I think we're looking at more time than we initially projected. Perhaps significantly more. Alex's hand tightened around Mark's. How much more? The doctor allowed himself a small smile. Let's take it one scan at a time. But I'm cautiously optimistic that we might be talking years rather than months. Outside the hospital, standing in the weak autumn sunshine, Alex turned to Mark with tears shining in her eyes. I don't know what to do with this gift, she whispered. I've been living like I was dying. Now I have to learn how to live like I'm living. Mark cupped her face gently in his hands. "We'll figure it out together," he promised. One day at a time. The official launch of the Horizon Foundation for Family Support took place exactly 6 months after the night Mark had walked in on Alex crying in her office. The event was held in the company's atrium, transformed for the evening into an elegant venue filled with supporters, potential donors, and media. Alex stood at the podium, radiant in a deep green dress that brought out the color in her eyes. The physical toll. That night, as applause filled the room and Lily ran into Alex's arms, Mark realized he hadn't walked in on a woman who was dying, he had walked in on the moment all three of them truly began to live.